Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry, Cigar Hurd, here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less. This is a podcast about the NBA with a Phoenix Suns focus. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined as always by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, what's going on, my friend?
We're stuck in a pretty tight game here, Max, and we're going to be doing something different for the episode today, so I'm really excited to jump right into this one.
We are, yeah. We're currently coming to you from the fourth quarter of the Suns-Pistons game. We're not gonna live call the game because that would be boring as hell. You've all seen it already. Yep. But we are gonna have our conversation sort of based on the game, kind of like two buddies hanging out watching the game. David, I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of the stuff in this game that we'd probably want to talk about anyway. The TJ ejection has brought a different angle to this game, but yeah, I'm interested and intrigued to get stuck into this one, Max.
So what did you think? You mentioned it already. What did you think about the TJ Warren ejection?
Yeah, I think it was probably an offensive foul, Max. We don't know what TJ said to the ref to get himself ejected. I'm sure it was worthy. He's a pretty quiet guy normally, but probably an accumulation of frustration rather than that specific foul, Max. What did you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. A lot of people who I was watching, see on Twitter talk about it. They were pretty mad about it, but I think it was more frustration just for two things, because all the bad calls that happened in the game so far, and then also, like you said, he got ejected, so people were frustrated about that. I really don't think that that the foul was that bad of a call. I mean, it wasn't. It could have gone either way. It kind of looked probably to the ref, because I thought initially too that he slapped him in the face.
Yep.
But it really was on the shoulder. So I think it probably shouldn't have been called, but I understand why the ref called it, and I think TJ probably overreacted a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, certainly not as bad as the Ayton call where Griffin, clearly flopped, which might have been part of TJ's reaction overall.
Yep. So Holmes just had a really nice play. David, Holmes has been really good in this game and sort of really good altogether. What are your thoughts on him and maybe in this game and also just fast couple?
We've got really good minutes out of the center position tonight. I think that it's been one of Ayton's better all-round games as well. But Holmes has certainly brought the energy, and if that means that he lifts Ayton up another gear too, I think getting good 48 minutes from the 5 position is crucial for the Suns.
Yeah, I've actually liked the way Ayton's played too. I thought he had a couple of nice defensive plays. He's still not rotating when he's supposed to a lot of times. In fact, one time Booker got really, really mad at him, which Booker continues to do this thing where he gets really mad at Ayton on defense, which is, it's always kind of funny, even though Booker's been playing better defense lately,
It's a bit of a recurring theme that people are noticing, I think, but as long as it's not killing the relationship or killing Ayton's confidence, I'm all for it. We've talked about it quite a bit. Someone needs to get vocal on this team, Max.
Yep.
Back from a timeout here, we've skipped ahead to 7:40. Terrible defensive possessions there by the Suns. We're now 9 down, so we're going to have to get on a little bit of a run here to get back in the game.
Well, at least Isaiah Cannon's in the game. I mean, well, who else could you want at a time like this?
Yeah, Ayton just got fouled for anyone who's not watching. And
I was hoping they were going to call a foul on that because that was pretty obvious.
Something we definitely needed after a bit of a wild pass from Booker. But what have you thought about Ayton's game overall here, Max?
Pretty good. The similar mistakes he usually makes, but I think he's been better on defense than he usually is.
Yep.
He's been active. I thought he's done a pretty good job on Drummond. Although Drummond's a much better matchup for him than Embiid, because, I mean, just if you want to know why, watch Embiid play against Drummond.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you and I have discussed, earlier in the game while we were just watching that, they've definitely come in with a defensive scheme here, and, maybe that helps Ayton. He's not overthinking things. He's just playing really simply, and I think, as you said, he can play Drummond pretty simply, not having to worry about him stretching out to the three-point line or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. They've been trying to trap people at certain times of the game. In fact, we just watched Booker seem to get mad, I think, at Cannon for not trapping Jackson in the corner over there, and then eventually it worked out because they turned the ball over, but I think that they were supposed to trap there a little earlier.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Jackson's been pretty horrible in this game, and we're seeing kind of turnovers and missed shots from both the Pistons and the Suns here. We just can't.
Booker really needed that one to go down. His 3-point shooting has been he's been way off lately. That's for sure.
we're definitely playing into their hands a little bit here, and they're doing us some favors to hopefully keep us in the game.
They're missing a lot of shots.
We need Booker to get hot again. He's probably been really our whole offense this game. What do you think?
I mean, he's been the best player on our team, I think, for the past few games.
Yep.
He's just, even though he's not making, that's kind of what's remarkable about it. Even though he's not making threes, which is kind of his calling card, he's still been incredibly good. It's crazy.
Yeah, all these percentages have kind of regressed back down to last season, but as you see, the Suns turn it over again. They're on a pick and roll, but yeah, he's definitely been better inside the arc, his playmaking, but the 3-point shots is a little bit off.
And I was going to say the turnovers have been better too. That wasn't great, but...
yeah, that was a bad pass that leads to another Pistons 3-point shot here, and this game might be over before we've even started, Max.
Yeah, so we're going to commercial break. Let's get into a little around the NBA stuff, because I've been in love with this league right now, David.
Yep.
The Western Conference it's ridiculous. I think what the kids would say is it's lit, David. Did I use that right? I mean, I think I don't look at the standings today, but I looked at them yesterday. There was a 4-team tie for first yesterday.
Yep.
Which is insane. And it was none of the 4 teams that I think that you'd expect to be up there. It was like Memphis, Clippers. I think OKC was there. They lost last night, but it's just, David, I think it's going to be a really fun league to watch all season long, because I don't think this is going to break up. I think we're going to kind of have a claustrophobic top 8 kind of all season long.
Yeah, there's 11 teams of the 15 in the Western Conference that were over 500 at the start of today, Max, which is just crazy compared to, I think, 7 in the East. And the Suns, they sit all the way down the bottom there, and there's not really another team to attach ourselves to at the bottom of the West right now. It's really hard to see who's going to be a team that might fall down. I'm sure towards the end there might be some teams that pull up stumps, as we like to say in Australia, and maybe look for draft picks rather than chasing a playoff spot. But yeah, even teams like Sacramento, Memphis are right at the top there, one of those surprising teams you were talking about. Yeah, there's not really anyone who's going to drop just yet.
No, it doesn't look like it. If I had to bet on it, I think it's probably going to be Dallas and maybe even San Antonio. I know you like San Antonio a little more than me before the season started. They don't have enough guys. They seem like they're really hurting for guards.
Real talent drop off there, and they're the teams I've got noted down as well, Max, which is funny. And then Sacramento, will they ever regress back to what we thought that they would be? But the Suns are probably going to be at the bottom there, no matter how well we do for the rest of the season. And it's probably more about how many East teams are going to be in the final standings above us, Max. There's kind of Atlanta, Cleveland, Chicago, even the Knicks and Washington. So we could be the worst team in the West, but only the 4th or 5th worst team overall in the league.
Yeah, I would still probably bet on 4th. I think Atlanta, Cleveland, and Chicago will be worse than us, mainly because I think we're going to try the entire season and they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe New York. We'll see about New York. Have there been any news on Porzingis? I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard anything about him kind of returning to any contact or anything like that. I don't think they're in any rush to bring him back. Probably getting another high draft pick in for them is probably crucial to their overall future. And a good note by you there. I think, I agree. Phoenix are going to probably fight right to the end, and it could be detrimental. Obviously, the lotto odds are a little better for us, but it could mean that we end up with a 5th or 6th pick instead of one of those top 3.
Which would not be great. All right, so we're back in it. I mean, the game's back on. I didn't mean the Suns are back in the game. We just turned the ball over again. So
right on cue with the turnover there, and a big defensive stop on Blake as he flops to the ground again for another time.
So that was the most egregious one, right? He acted like he got shot.
Yeah.
He's been pretty bad today in terms of that. He's been acting. It's been pretty annoying. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I think, the Suns have frustrated him with the way that they've brought it, and unfortunately just the Pistons' other guys have made enough shots to put this lead on us, and the Suns haven't been able to make theirs outside of Booker, basically.
It looks like he did get hit in the head, but it was pretty inadvertent. I see why they didn't call it, but maybe he actually did get hurt.
We'll give him that one. It's an accumulation.
He can have one. But yeah, man, this team is really emphasizing how badly the Suns need another guard. Devin Booker's their only guard who's really NBA caliber right now. I mean, Crawford gets hot at times. I know he hit the game winner. People like him, but he's not really an NBA guard right now. he's used to be, so he can kind of pull it out when he needs to. Oh, that was a bad turnover. This is getting bad, David.
This is, yeah, and another foul there by Ayton on Drummond, sending him to the line. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think it was warning signs when TJ got himself ejected, because I think the Suns made the right move to bring Jackson in as the guy into the starting lineup, just particularly with that defensive scheme that they were trying to play. But then all of a sudden you don't have Jackson to come off the bench, and we're going to get stuck with a lot of heavy minutes from Kanan and Crawford, as you said, who's been better. Kanan's been worse in recent times, and it's just really highlighted that talent drop-off as Troy Daniels still sits there at the end of the bench and can't get on the court, Max.
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand why Kanan is playing over Crawford at this point.
Daniels, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, I meant Daniels. Sorry, I'm distracted by Devin Booker being a superhero. The Kanan doesn't do anything well at all. He's a bad defender. He's bad running the offense. He's a bad shooter. I mean, okay, he's an okay shooter, but he's not as good as Daniels. Daniels is much, much better than him at shooting.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to compare it, is to compare those two and look at Kanan when he's playing on the court. There's an argument there that, you want two playmakers out on the court, but then if you actually watch the games, most of the time when he's playing with Crawford's the one doing the playmaking and Kanan's just sitting in the corner. And then, they're using Kanan as the point of attack defender, but, he's no better than any of those other options in that lineup. So, yeah, I think if you compare it purely on that, it is hard to see why Daniels can't get on the court more. And we come back to something we've discussed quite a bit, purely in Kanan, maybe knowing the offense better, but knowing the offense and actually being able to execute are kind of two different things, Max.
They certainly are.
Another big turnover to a fast break bucket there, and this game is probably over, Max.
It's starting to feel over, but, maybe they'll hit a couple of threes. They got Crawford and Booker, and both of them get pretty lightning hot pretty quick. But it's going to have to happen now.
And right on cue, Booker hits a three to keep us 9 points in the game.
A three from, I don't know, what's a town near Detroit that's far away?
Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he's from, Max.
That was from Grand Rapids.
And we've just seen the Suns hack Drummond here, so we might have a few stops in the game to keep talking here, Max, because that might be definitely the first time we've seen Igor use the hack in game, and we'll see with Drummond kind of I can't remember the last time he's hit 2 free throws, although he has been better, I think, this season.
He's been pretty decent today, but yeah, he's not the best free throw shooter. I think it's a desperation tactic. I don't hate it. Hey, he missed the first one. The thing about hack a player, I think it works the best when you're playing against a team when you're in the lead. Because it's so hard for them to build momentum.
It really is, yeah. And Drummond's just missed both there, so it definitely worked in this case, and they'll probably go back to it again. But we see Booker get fouled there, which was very lucky as he was looking a little out of control. But yeah, it's an interesting strategy to try and get them back in the game here. We saw through the first half that the offense was hot, and we were kind of tired the whole way through because the Suns' defense has really struggled against the Pistons. As we noted, guarded Griffin quite well, but it's leaving a lot of other guys open. So it's going to be interesting here as Ariza leaves his feet and is called for a travel for another turnover there, Max. This is killing us.
It seems pretty clear to me, and I think you just alluded to that. They're tired. The Warren injury hurt a lot, or not the injury, ejection, because they just lost a pillar of their offense, and the rest of the guys got to do more, and everyone's just tired.
Yeah, which is an interesting note when I was kind of preparing for the pod. Since Ariza's come back from his hiatus for personal issues, he's been, really quite good, Max, but probably the thing that stands out the most for him is he's averaging 40 minutes a game. Over the 3 games since he's come back, he's over 40 minutes, as I said. I think he's 8 of 19 from 3, which is quite good, averaging 3.6 assists. But again, that ties into the discussion we were having before about guard, and we've got depth at the wing, and a lot of guys are having to kind of cross over multiple positions. And not sure how many minutes he's played tonight, Max, but I'm sure he's pushing up to that 40-minute mark again.
Yeah, they need him out there, especially since I think he's been invigorated, not only since he's gotten back, but just with Mikal next to him. I think we both made this point before. It's really hard to play consistent, energized defense when you're the only guy trying to do it, and just having Mikal there with him, and just another wing guy who's doing what he's doing. I think it's it's easier to play defense when you have people behind you doing it.
We've
too.
said it about Ariza all along. He's going to look better on both ends of the floor as the guys around him are looking better. So as the telecast puts up the Suns' schedule with Indiana, the Clippers, Orlando, Lakers, and Sacramento coming up. So it gets a little easier, Max, as the Suns are looking like a better team. We definitely seem to be out of the skid from early on in the season, but yeah, no easy games in the NBA as we've been discussing.
No, I was just about to say that before the season started, that looked like the easy stretch of the schedule, but Orlando and Sacramento are both, I think, above 500. I think Orlando beat LA pretty easily today.
Yep, and they're around 500, as you said, and the East is, not quite as strong as the West, but there's definitely some hard teams there as Bridges misses the three.
That was a nice pass by Booker.
Follows up his rebound and gets Ayton under the bucket. So we're hanging in there, still 9 points down here with just under 4 minutes to play, Max.
Yeah, they're going to need some hot shooting and some shooting luck on the other end. Like, they've been getting lucky this game with Detroit missing. They're going to need some more of that.
Definitely. As Griffin right on cue knocks a three down. So we're not looking too good in this one, Max.
Nope. At this point, it's Devin Booker stat watch, which has been the past couple of seasons. Just hoping he can get a lot of points. It's always fun when he does that.
And right on cue again. He goes with the lefty layup and gets it. But he is kind of averaging 24 points and 7 assists since heading over to point book. The second game in a row they've gone with that starting lineup here, Max. Hopefully is going to continue. Who knows what would have happened in the second half if TJ had have stayed in the game. But, as I said before, the percentages have come down. We think he's maybe looking a little bit healthier, and 45 assists and just 19 turnovers since, what I would class as point book, which is, I'm kind of saying around the Spurs game is when he really started playing point, even though they may have, not changed the starting lineup till a couple of games later, Max. But go into another timeout, 10 points down here with 2 minutes and 37 seconds left to go.
And that one was really unfortunate because Mikal had a great pass to Ayton, and he would have had an easy dunk and just wasn't ready for it. And that's something that DeAndre's not there yet with his awareness on either end. But even on offense, where he's obviously much better, I don't think he has bad hands. I think he has pretty good hands, but he mishandles and fumbles so many passes and even rebounds too. And I think it's mostly because the game's, he's a rookie. The game's pretty fast for him right now. And he's not seeing these things at the speed that the other players are seeing it at. And I think that is something he'll get better at. But right now, it can sometimes kill him, as it did right there.
Yeah, it's something you picked up on a few games ago now, and I've definitely seen it more since you noted it. I think he does have great hands. He's just overthinking the game on, both ends, which is a little bit of a concern. We kind of saw it early on in the season with the defense, and it meant some pretty bad low-light plays. But, it's maybe just started to creep into his offense a little bit here, and he's kind of lost that rookie confidence and isn't playing with the same flow as he probably was early on in the season. I did note earlier that, this game was probably his best all-around game just in terms of fundamentals and playing within the system. But when the pressure's on and those moments come, that's when some of the mistakes are coming with Ayton, I think.
Yep, I agree. And I don't want to be too down on them. Like, they were competitive much more so than they were earlier in the season. This is a tough team. An early Sunday game on the road is never easy. So I don't want to, hate on their performance today. They've been pretty fine, but it's a little disappointing because it looked like they had a chance to win this one.
Yeah, I think frustration's going to come from fans as we, see ourselves in more games and then they slip away. But, for me, the Milwaukee game in particular was a sign that this team is certainly not giving up, and they do believe in themselves. And not to keep harping on the same point, but there's just a clear talent drop-off here between units and to some of these teams that they're playing, Max. And
they can't just keep playing Crawford and Cannon together for 15 minutes a game. That's not viable. It's just not. You're going to defend nobody, and your offense is going to suck. You're just going to be bad on both ends when you do that.
Yep. The Kane-Crawford thing is probably the biggest question mark right now, and something that we need to see a resolution to. We can keep talking about how much or how little options Igor has behind them, but when the results are that bad, you have to try something. So I would hope, I think we're back home after this mini road trip here, and I think something I've touched on in the past before is it's hard to make decisions on the run like that, particularly when you're on road trips. So,
right.
Maybe once they can get a couple of practices in, that might be, when we see, some changes, some bigger changes to the rotation, Max. But, this one in particular, obviously the TJ ejection really hurt them too. as Griffin is just toying with the Suns now, and this one's all but over. So we can probably talk about some bigger things than just this game now, Max.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to some other stuff. What do you think, David?
Yep, let's do it.
So, my first thing, while I load my notes up here, did you see the Luka Doncic, Jaylen Brown thing yesterday?
I did, and I really disliked it. I think it first popped onto my feed from an Australian guy that I follow who noted that if that was Dellavedova, Americans would have gone absolutely crazy for how dirty the play was, which I think, to be honest, is a fair comment. I think Jaylen Brown's, from what I've seen, commentary on that has kind of got away with it a little bit. I think it was a dirty play, kind of lowering the shoulder into a guy that wasn't looking after he, just cooked you.
Yeah, the thing about it is, he didn't really try to hurt him hard, which I think is why Celtics fans and announcers and et cetera are, downplaying it and saying Jalen didn't do anything. But he very clearly intended to walk into Luka's path and give him a little bit of a shiv, right? There's no doubt he tried to do that. And that's why I don't understand why everyone's reacting like, oh my God, Jaylen Brown didn't do anything. I'm seeing respectable, verified people on Celtics Twitter doing this. It's just come on, man, watch the damn game with a little bit of objectivity for once.
Exactly. I absolutely hate the guys, stepping in the open court that we've seen happen to Ayton a couple of times, just drawing a charge. That's not a basketball play, but the opposite of that is I can't stand dirty plays like that where a guy's not looking. It's not a basketball play, and you may not really intend to hurt someone, but you could really do some damage to someone. And as I said, I think play like that, if it was, Dellavedova a couple of years ago, would have been replayed, a million times over in the playoffs or something. And, there needs to be more criticism of a play like that, I think.
Yep, I agree. Let's turn to another Suns thing that I've been wanting to talk about and I haven't had a chance to talk about yet. Josh Jackson, for the past few games, I think has clearly been playing better. The question is, do you think it's a cause for encouragement? Do you think this is the kind of playing better that is sustainable and that he might actually be, maybe not totally turning it around, but figuring something out he can do well? Or do you think it's just been his shots have been going in and sort of random variation?
No, I think this is where, watching games is really crucial and not just picking stats apart, because I think we've definitely seen a guy that's a lot more under control. It's not just that he's hit a couple of bad shots and therefore things are looking better for him. I think, before this game, he'd settled into about 15 minutes a game, kind of give or take. If he wasn't doing the right things, maybe it was more like 12 or 13. And if he earned a few more minutes, it kind of pushed up to 17 or 18 minutes max. But, the Bucks game, he was 6 or 7 from the free throw line. I think he was the right type of aggressive, and I think we even saw that in the first half of this Pistons game. I think someone's definitely noted to him that he's, shying away from the basket, away from contact, and he could actually be taking an extra step and using his length. There was a nice layup in this Pistons game where he used his length to finish on a pretty tough challenge from the Pistons. So I think we're seeing, him more under control. I think he's, focused on defense as well. I actually love him with Mikal. You mentioned before about Ariza playing with Mikal and kind of motivating him. I think Mikal brings out the best in Josh as well. I think he sees Mikal deflecting balls, but staying down in stance and not gambling too much. And I think he actually feeds off that a little bit. So I've actually been pretty impressed with Josh, and tying back into what we were discussing before with Crawford and Kanan. Obviously, when the game was on and slipping away, we kind of got a little bit out of control there, Max, but no pun intended for Jackson. But, I'd like to see Jackson be the one that takes Kanan's minutes, because, as you said, if Kanan's not running the point guard slot, just kind of standing, taking open threes, and not defending, I think we can do that just as well with Jackson and probably reward him with some more minutes, Max. But, you were probably more critical of him earlier on in the season than I was. So have you turned around at all?
You said you'd like Jackson to take Cannon's minutes. I'd like literally anyone to take Cannon's minutes. Do you want Cannon's minutes, David?
How about George King? Can we call George King up?
Sure, why the hell not? I am happy with what I've seen from Josh lately. I think that there is a little bit of the shots just going down thing going on here, but I also think he's been under control to an extent that he wasn't earlier. There's still the occasional horrible drive the occasional, offensive foul when he tries to dunk on someone when he clearly has no chance to do so, which happened today. But it's been better.
Yeah.
As long as as long as we're trending upward, I think it's a good thing. But I'm still pretty out on him. I was saying earlier today that obviously Markelle Fultz now seems to be very, very available. I'm not sure this is something Philly would go for, but I'm not a huge fan of trading for Fultz because I don't think this is the right culture for him. But if we are going to trade something of value for him, I think that the Josh Jackson Fultz swap is probably where I would want to go with it. Just because I think Josh could turn into being an okay player. I'm a little low on him being like a star who would make sense on this team, like at all.
Yeah.
Even if he's going to be good, I don't like him on this team particularly. Fultz, on the other hand, while he's just kind of been, obviously a head case and a train wreck, if he does pan out somehow, the upside play, he is kind of ideal for what you want next to Booker because he's got that size, that length to play defense next to him. He's absurdly athletic. He could be the primary initiator because he's a great passer. And then, it comes down to the shooting. Obviously, in college, he was an incredible shooter. So if he gets back to there, he'd be great. Spacing the floor with Booker. But even if he just got to be respectable, that would make a lot of sense to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, that kind of trade is something we discussed earlier on in the year, and it didn't make sense from probably either side purely because I think, as you noted, not a great situation for Fultz to come into to try and turn his career around. And Jackson on Philly didn't look like a great fit, but all of a sudden they trade away a couple of combo forwards essentially in Covington and Saric. They look a little bit weak on the wing, as well as a couple of other positions. They just look a bit weak overall. Bringing Butler in, they've certainly thinned out a little bit, but there might actually be a role there for Jackson now. And yeah, I think maybe if that's all the price is, the Suns may need to take a gamble on a former number one pick in Fultz. So yeah, it's something that I'd watch. I think I agree in the fact that I'd probably do a trade like that. I think what you noted in terms of Jackson's fit on this team long term probably means that you can afford to make a deal like that, because it's just hard to really project forward on the next kind of Suns playoff team with this, little young core and kind of see a real, future role for Josh in extended minutes. Whilst he's been good in this 15 to 20 minute a game sort of role, I'm not sure that's exactly what he'd want to be doing.
Well, and then one thing that's also really happened, well, two things. We drafted Mikal Bridges, who is a wing, who looks like he's going to be a part of it. And then also TJ Warren was the guy. I mean, if you would have asked me last season to bet $100 on who developed three-point shot, Josh or TJ, I would have bet on Josh, but I would have lost that $100. TJ is the one who developed it, so I think he's the guy who you're looking to keep around, or at least until you have a star trade like we discussed. So the fact that TJ Warren's improved and we've drafted Mikal, who looks like he's a player early on, it makes Josh Jackson look a lot more expendable.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice segue into kind of what a lot of people are touching on at the moment with the three-man lineup of Booker, Ayton, and Mikal being kind of our best three-man lineup with about a 16 net rating on the season in lineups that have kind of played extensive minutes. I think we're talking any lineup that's played over 100 minutes or so. So when you've got a core like that with those three young guys all around about the same age, that's going to help your kind of roster construction going forward. And interestingly, if you take Ayton out and put TJ in, that's our second best net rating lineup over 100 minutes max. So Book, TJ, and Mikal is also working for the Suns. So that just kind of illustrates again that in terms of wing rotation and young core pieces, Josh is definitely the odd man out there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that shows you one of the main reasons for optimism for this season is that some younger cores are carried kind of by their older players or, the teams that are playing better.
Yeah.
That's not the Suns. Their best players are their young guys. So that's good. And maybe they can do a better job surrounding them with better veterans going forward. Although, as we said, Ariza's been better lately, so we'll see. Maybe that'll improve. But the other ones, I mean, Brian Anderson, I think we can now say was a complete disaster.
Yep.
I don't see that one really turning around. And then Crawford's been, as we mentioned, he's had the game winner, and he's had some moments where he got hot, but he's not been good, I wouldn't say. I think that's a stretch to say he's been good. Kanan, if you want to call him a veteran, has been bad. So they need to do a better job bringing players around their young core who are good. But, hey, I'd rather have the problem be that the veterans we're bringing in are bad than that our young guys who we're relying on for the future are bad.
Exactly, and I think hopefully we'll see things, flip at some point, maybe after the trade deadline, after the All-Star break, something we've discussed before, how we would GM the Suns. You would probably do it a little bit earlier than I would in the season. But Anderson has kind of already accepted a demotion to the bench. Ariza, whether it's via a buyout or a trade or something, might be happy moving on towards the end of the year, and we can really find out what we've got in these young guys. The Anderson trade's a funny one that you mentioned. We're probably already at the point where it's really going to come down to if Melton can ever be the player that we kind of think he can be when he's given the opportunity, and I guess whether Knight comes back for Houston, because Anderson's already basically a non-event for the Suns, and Marquise Chris has continued to be a tire fire in Houston. So yeah, funnily enough, it's coming down to when Knight returns, whether the Suns have a point guard and whether Melton can be a player, Max.
I'm almost positive they were going to stretch Knight this summer, and they're going to do the same with Anderson. So that's almost like, unless Knight comes back and is incredible, which I kind of hold my breath on that one, like that's kind of a wash no matter what. To me, it's just a Melton Chris trade, and Chris, I think, is done. I think he's going to be on the Guangdong Tigers soon enough. And Melton, obviously, I've said a million times, I think has a lot of potential. I think he's growing on you a little bit too. He can't run an offense right now. He's not an NBA point guard right now, which I think is why he's not playing. But I really hope Igor realizes soon that what he needs next to Crawford in that backup unit isn't, another NBA point guard. He just needs somebody who can play defense and, just be complimentary to everybody else. And also, I'm not sure Melton can't shoot. Like, it kind of looks like he can shoot from what we've seen. It's a small sample, but I'd like to see more of it. That's kind of my biggest problem with Igor right now, is that I think he's so focused on his offense and getting that to run well. Which I get it. That's what he got hired on the job. That's why he's, a coach who was, viable for an NBA job, is because his offense was so good, and you want to stick with what you got you there. But man, they really need to adjust to what the roster is right now, and the roster right now is a team that should be, when Booker's not on the floor, they should be grinding out possessions.
Yeah, I hate to keep harping on the same points, but we're a Phoenix Suns podcast here, and we need to talk about what the kind of key things are, and Kanan's certainly it. I think what you said, the role that Kanan's playing, there's no reason why Melton can't play that role. Particularly, Kanan's like 40% from field on the season. I think around 35 from three, which is, I guess, decent. Maybe Melton would struggle to match that. But, in the last 4 or 5 games, the 4 games before this Detroit one, for instance, Kanan's only had like 15 points on kind of 5 of 21 shooting. I'm pretty sure Melton can at least match that and at least bring some defense and, not be continually going under screens and kind of helping the bigs out a little bit more with some perimeter defense, Max. So I agree. I think you've nailed it on the head. Igor's definitely tied to someone that can run the offense. But in the role that we're seeing, Caton, particularly that second sub where he plays along with Crawford. Crawford's clearly the playmaker in that team, and that's where you need to start getting Kanan out and getting guys like Melton in.
Yeah, I can't watch any more Kanan Crawford minutes. That's the thing that's the most poisonous thing to my brain when I'm watching the Suns right now.
And I think the majority of the fan base agrees with you, Max. That's
yeah, I
for
think
sure.
so too. Let's do at least one more league-wide thing.
Sure.
I think the MVP race is pretty interesting.
It's very interesting.
Giannis, I think, right now would be the odds-on favorite, but there's some other guys who are really playing very well, and one who's not getting enough credit, I don't think. I don't know how much you've watched Memphis and how good they've been, but Marc Gasol has been, by the advanced metrics, one of the best players in the entire league. In fact, the best player in the league by the advanced metrics. He's a DPOY candidate for sure, and I think he might also be a kind of a sneaky dark horse MVP candidate.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that a team like that makes a jump, I think an MVP candidate is going to, rise from the ashes, so to speak. I think you're right, he's not getting in a lot of those conversations right now, and that's probably unfair. Mainly, and I'm guilty of this too, I think that everyone just expects Memphis to drop off at some point, and therefore their record won't really be conducive to having an MVP type guy on there. But, at the moment, they're, sitting at the top of the West, kind of 12-6, I think they are at the moment, and he's the best player on the team. So, when you've got such a tight MVP race, I think you're right. I think Giannis is leading it, and then there's like a little chasing pack behind him. But I would put Gasol in there. I was actually going to ask you a kind of a rough candidate for the MVP race, but I would imagine that you would throw up Gasol then. Is there any others that you've got your eye on?
That's a good question. I would say maybe Lillard sort of on the outskirts. Really like how he's played.
Yep.
Portland's obviously been really good. Embiid, I don't know. He's kind of getting a lot of pub. I think Philadelphia is not as good as their record is, so I think they might fall off a little bit. But he's been just impossible. I know in our notes you mentioned Lowry. Do you want to talk about Lowry a little bit? He's been extremely good.
Lowry's been really good. That's a tough one. Obviously, with the Kawhi DeRozan trade, a lot of people are just going to look to Kawhi as being the reason that they've made, I guess, an extra leap so far in the regular season. But, I've noticed a lot of smart Toronto people call out Kyle Lowry's play and him being just as important to that team at the moment. So, yeah, he and Kawhi are kind of tied together, and they probably will be for quite a while until maybe one really rises to the top for that team. Toronto, I think, are 16-4 or something at the moment. So at least one of those guys, if not both of them, is going to be a deserved candidate all throughout the season. And finally, we just played Detroit. We noted that the Suns did a pretty good job on Blake Griffin, maybe, and towards the end there, where he probably put the team on his back and won them the game. But he's another roughie for me. Detroit are only, I think, 10-7, so they'd really have to improve for the rest of the year and maintain it. Probably another team that everyone expects to drop off at some point, Max. But he's 25 points per game, which is pretty much a career high for him, I believe. He's 40% from three, which is also a career high for him, and 10.4 rebounds per game, which I believe is a career high. You have to go all the way back to his kind of rookie and sophomore seasons to get those kind of numbers. So didn't see that coming, obviously, playing next to Andre Drummond. A lot of his rebounds got eaten up by DeAndre Jordan in his Clippers career, but he's kind of bumped everything up across the board and is probably the reason that the Pistons are so good at the moment too.
Yeah, no, Blake's a great name to bring up, especially really early in the season. He was going nuclear for a while. I think he had like 50 points against the Sixers, but problem with Blake, he gets hurt all the time. I think if he stayed healthy the entire season and kept Detroit in the top four, he'd be a candidate for sure. He's been a top 5 MVP candidate before, right? I think he finished the top 5 with the Clippers one of those years.
Yeah, and as you said, generally in the conversation until he gets injured every year. So, yeah, I think that's probably the most important point with him as a player, and with any team that he's the best player on. It's hard to buy in on Detroit because, yeah, he's probably bound to spend a little bit of time on the sidelines, and therefore Detroit, as we just saw in the game against Phoenix, would probably drop off the cliff a little bit, because as we've gone over quite extensively with Phoenix's talent drop-off, there's not much there on that Pistons second unit either, Max. So
I've got one for you who fits the exact thing you've been talking about to a T.
Go for it.
I saw today on Twitter that this team is the team that has suffered the most from, I guess, bad luck in terms of like what their margin versus what their record is. And one player has just been magnificent, keeping them alive and keeping them in these games they've been losing close. They're near and dear to my heart because I made a crazy prediction about them. David, it's Kemba Walker and the Charlotte Hornets. Kemba Walker has been insane this year.
He really has, yeah. He's not on my list, and it's probably a shame by me that he's not, because he definitely deserves to be in that conversation. Charlotte's record is just okay, but it would be miserable without him. So definitely worth bringing up a name like Kemba.
Can you imagine if the Suns would have traded Josh Jackson for him? Like, it was kind of vaguely rumored. I don't know if that was ever a real thing, but had a trade like that happened, I think Kemba and Booker they'd be one of these teams in the Western Conference, and it's a surprise top 8.
Oh, they'd be a fun team to watch for sure, and would probably have Suns fans more excited than what they are right now. But Charlotte, I guess, for all the rumors, didn't appear to want to let go of him, and certainly don't appear to want to let go of him now. I'd say that they're probably more prone to making another trade to keep him happy and maybe get him some pieces to push for the playoffs, Max, rather than make a trade to ship Kemba out.
Yeah, I think that they're much more gunning that way. I fully expect them to give Kemba the full max this offseason. They might even give him the super max if he qualifies for All-NBA, which is kind of where he's headed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's gonna kill their team long term, but at the same time I can't really blame them for it. They consider him to be their best player in franchise history, which he is. So listen, sometimes winning the title is not the only thing. Your fans love a guy, and you're going to pay a guy, and that's kind of where Charlotte's headed, I think.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It could destine them to mediocrity, but he's not going to say no to that kind of contract, and Charlotte become pretty damn irrelevant if they don't keep a guy like Walker on the team. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It seems to be a match made in heaven.
They've been a rumored Bradley Beal destination, which I think is awesome.
Ooh, interesting.
What do you think about the Washington Wizards situation? We won't talk about Dwight Howard and his stuff because that's a fraught issue, and I don't want to get into it.
I don't want to go anywhere near that one.
Me neither. So let's not. So let's talk about the three main guys there: John Wall, Bradley Beal, Otto Porter, and sort of. Well, I'll ask you two things. First, to keep it Suns related, would you want the Suns to trade for any of those guys? And second, whether or not you do, where do you see those guys? What do you see Washington doing with those guys?
Yeah, I think it's really tough to answer your first question with Phoenix. I think Beal is probably the only one that you'd really look at. I'm a big Otto Porter fan, but when you've got TJ Warren on a great contract and Mikal Bridges on, a rookie contract, I just think that pay what you're going to have to give up for Otto and then the salary that he's owed for quite some time just takes him out of the equation.
And just to piggyback on that before you go on, If the Suns traded for Otto Porter with his personality type, which is super docile and super, defers to people, he would just fall right into the crap that the Suns do, and he would be a lot worse, I think. But go on.
Yeah, I'm not into that. But they'll definitely look to trade Otto somewhere, I'm sure. But I think we both agree that Beal is probably the most attractive piece, both from a Phoenix point of view and probably a league-wide point of view. I think John Wall isn't going anywhere. Many people have touched on that, and certainly not going anywhere soon with that trade kicker that he's got. So I think Beal's the most likely to go if you're talking about them making a trade this season before the trade deadline. And he would have a number of suitors, of which Phoenix is probably one. Many people have brought him up. I don't actually love him for Phoenix, just from a roster construction standpoint going forward. I think, a lot of smart people, Suns people that I follow have been into the idea purely because, we keep talking about talent, and he would be a great talent acquisition for this roster, and you just try and figure it out. Just kind of longer term, I think you'd still need a point guard, and then it just kind of gets tricky to fit all the pieces in around it. But and defensively as well with him and Booker as a backcourt, if you do, I guess, shy away from full-time point book. But I know you're a hell of a lot more into full-time point book than I am, Max. So what do you think about the Suns chasing Beal and what it might cost us, I suppose?
It's certainly not ideal for the reasons you said. He's not a point guard. He's not the best defender, although he's not a bad defender, and he's pretty well-sized.
Yep.
I think if he were engaged, he could actually be probably like a slightly above average defender for his position. And here's the thing about him. When John Wall was out last season for, 2 months? It was a while. His playmaking was significantly better. He was, routinely getting in the kind of the Booker level assists. He was 7 to 9.
Yeah.
Low turnover. He was running the team fine. The team was playing pretty well. Like, I don't think he's a natural point guard, and as Booker isn't right now either. But I think that he's good enough where they'd be pretty good. And also, I think, as you mentioned, I am a lot higher on Booker developing and getting better at that as he goes on. I think he's already underrated at it. He's got pretty good vision. He's really, the weird thing about Booker is I think his vision's better than his execution pass-wise. Yeah. And so I think I think it's probably easier to get better at the execution part. The vision part's the harder thing. It's more the natural ability.
I think a lot of the turnovers that we saw down the stretch tonight against the Pistons were, him seeing passes and kind of just being a little bit late or not executing the pass, quite well enough or being a little bit too predictable. But yeah, I think it's a good point. His court vision itself is definitely something that leans to him being able to play more of a role like that.
Yeah, he needs to get stronger, I think, and get a better handle. Yeah. I think that would help him a lot. I think it's more the problem than him just not being a natural point guard, which is why I'm pretty high on him being an initiator later on. But here's the other thing about trading for Bradley Beal, which I think is sort of overlooked. He's on a pretty decent contract compared to a lot of the stars in the NBA.
It's a great contract, yeah.
So if you got him, and let's say it works out fine, doesn't work out great, like he's good, but it's clear the Suns aren't going to go long term with him. He's going to be a very easy guy to trade when he's 27 years old on a 1 year, $28 million contract.
That's
you can turn around and trade him again.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, Drew Holiday's another guy that I keep bringing up who's on a very similar type deal, which is, a great value for a player like that. And I think we both agree it is probably a better fit next to Booker than Beal, but as you and I have both noted, not currently actually available, whereas Beal certainly seems to be someone that you could go and get. The one thing that I will say is I think what you've touched on, I certainly believe in Booker doing some primary, initiation duties on the court, Beal, I think, can give him more of a chop out to, what our current system is with Booker playing with Mikal, Ariza, and TJ. I think Beal's, much more able to go and collect the ball after a bucket from the opposition and bring it up the court and give Booker a bit of a chop out. So I do like it from that standpoint. And just recently in that starting lineup, we've seen Mikal become more of the point of attack defender. So if he keeps progressing as a guy that can guard the point guard, then we get into a situation that, we probably discussed pre-draft with the Suns, us wanting the Suns to draft Doncic, is all of a sudden you might have a three that can guard ones when needed. And then that side of the ball becomes a little easier to swallow as well. So I can definitely be talked into Beal. It probably just depends on what the cost is at the end of the day. And I think you and I probably agree that you'd probably look to throw Josh in a deal like that if Washington would take him. And then probably a hell of a lot of draft picks and things, because you'd be hoping that Washington were kind of blowing it up and seeing what they could get there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Washington would want. I'd imagine cap relief might be part of it, so maybe Ariza's part of the deal, just to get them that $50 million off the books.
Good point.
But yeah, I mean, maybe if they really buy into what TJ's been doing, but the thing about TJ is he's got 4 years left, even though he's a good player. I don't know if that's what they really want. So it is tough. It's going to come down a lot to what Washington wants. And that's why looking around the league, it's hard to come up with Washington trades. At least it is for me, because I don't know what Washington's going to want to do. They're saddled with this horrible John Wall contract that's just going to poison them for the next 4 years. It's like, I guess what you do when you have something like that is you just go for the most draft picks you can get and just try to get super young guys who are kind of coming into their own when Wall finally expires. But it's not an easy situation. They're basically in a no-win situation. So when someone's cornered in a gunfight in the corner of a room, like, how are they going to behave? Probably like an insane person.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've nailed it on the head. When you've got a contract like that runs for quite some time, maybe draft picks are positive for them, because if they can nail a couple of them, then you kind of offset a little bit by having some real valued guys. So guys like TJ that are on good value contracts, plus cheap young guys coming through the ranks, it is probably what Washington are eventually going to bite on Beal or Porter if they can't get off Wall, which I don't think they're going to be able to.
I don't know why anyone would trade for John Wall's contract. It's so bad. I'm going to put you on the spot here, though, David. Would you do this trade for Bradley Beal? Trevor Ariza, Josh Jackson, and then someone else to make the contract work? It would probably have to be like, what, Dragan Bender maybe would make the contract work, or the trade?
Yeah.
And then maybe throw in Troy Daniels, but something like that. And then you throw in the Milwaukee pick, and you throw in our own pick, top 3 protected this year, unprotected next year.
On the spot, I do that deal. I think Ariza's a wash, particularly if we're talking around the trade deadline, then you're getting something of value out of that signing for him, so that's great. Josh, we've talked about being kind of the most dispensable young piece on this team. We declined Dragon's option. He hasn't done anything to make us think that that's a bad idea just yet, so that's just salary. The Milwaukee pick, I think, is a pick that you happily give up in pretty much any situation that improves the overall talent value. And Suns picks, something we've also discussed in the past. With the current state of the team, you probably want some protection on it if you can for this season, but then going forward, you've kind of got all the young pieces you need, and at some point, if you need to upgrade the talent overall, you kind of got to give something up. So I'd probably be fine with an unprotected pick the following year, Max. So you've got me in on that one.
Yeah, I think I'm in on it too, and part of it is just like, I just don't want to waste Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges. Like, if you get Bradley Beal in here, they're going to be a lot better. And it's just going to be easier for them to develop.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the philosophy of the front office going forward too. We're already staring down the barrel of another season of Booker not making the playoffs after his big call last offseason. So he's not going to want to hear, we've got all these draft picks ready to go for you. He's going to want to hear, give me talent on the court. And that's where trades like this come from, I think.
Yeah, you just can't lose Devin Booker. And I think Kellen Olson made this point on Twitter, like, the Suns should be in. It's sad they're already here for a 22-year-old guy they just gave a massive extension to. But they need to be in convince Devin Booker to not leave mode, because he's their star and he really wants to win. He's a competitive guy and he doesn't seem particularly happy. I mean, sure, he's happier lately because things have been better, but there was a stretch there when they were getting their asses kicked, night in and night out. it was like, is Booker going to become the first guy ever to ask out before his extension even kicks in?
Yeah, and that was my motto for the GM pod, Operation Keep Booker Happy, Max. So yeah, I agree with anyone who's talking about that. But should we perhaps move on here, Max?
Yeah, let's do it. So I think you're going to throw in a little Did You Know in 7SOL as a combined segment?
Yeah, we're a bit of a relaxed episode here, so we've thrown away the usual structure to our pods, but I'll quickly go over the week that was here, Max, before jumping into that. So as we joked about, I think last episode, the Suns with that win over Milwaukee have kept our 1 win per episode streak alive, I believe. So we've had a loss to OKC, a loss to Philly, a loss to Chicago, that win versus Milwaukee 116 to 114. And unfortunately today we couldn't get the second win for a week, going down 107 to 118 against the Pistons, Max. So overall record sits at 4-15 at the moment, and no surprise to anyone that we're still last in the division and the conference. So we've got some upcoming games this week before our next episode, Max, which is Indiana at the Clippers and versus Orlando. So it's just the 3 games probably before our next episode, and I think that actually will round out November, Max.
I'm excited to see them play against some of these overachieving young teams. I think that's kind of the kind of teams they can beat.
And we'll be back obviously with another awards episode therefore with all the games done for November.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Teams played a little bit better than they were before, so the awards should be more fun to give out.
Yep, but I'll jump into my mashed segment here for you, Max. So, believe it or not, did you know this is the 28th episode of 7 Seconds or Less, Max? So I thought we'd do a quick segment this week and mix it in with my turn to ask the 7 seconds or less questions to you to end the episode. For this episode, we're going to talk all things Suns and the number 28. Max, there's only been one number 28 for the Suns, and I won't make you try and name him.
Thank you.
His name was Andrew Lang, a 6'11 center from Pine Bluff.
I know that. I've heard of him.
Arkansas, one of my favorites.
They drafted him really high, right?
Well, we'll get into that in a minute.
Okay.
He played 4 seasons with the Suns in the late 80s and early 90s. In fact, Max, he was drafted in 1988 with none other than the 28th overall pick.
Oh. Okay.
Just one of 3 players drafted with pick 28 by the Suns. The others were Rod Foster, who played 3 seasons, and Scal Labissiere, who was traded to Sacramento. The Suns' 28th season, Max, was the 95-96 season that ended up a perfectly balanced 41 wins and 41 losses, but only after the disastrous start to the season, which we discussed a few episodes ago. That team was led by Charles Barkley, who scored 28 points exactly only once in that season, a win over the Spurs. Max, how many times do you think Chuck scored more than 28 points in that season?
A lot, probably 45?
Nah, just the 16 times he scored over 28, the highest being 45 points in a loss to none other than the team we just watched, the Pistons.
I kind of forgot that people didn't score that much, besides Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of points, Dennis Johnson currently holds the 28th spot on the Suns' point-scoring leaderboard, a combo guard who amassed 4,140 points for the Suns in just 3 seasons. Now, a couple more not quite 28 fun facts for you, Max. No Sun has ever averaged 28 points per game in a season, but Tom Chambers came mighty close in the 89-90 season with 27.2 points per game. In a similar vein, Amari Stoudemire holds the record for player efficiency rating in a single season, just falling short of 28 again with a PER of 27.6 in 07-08. As you know, Max, I guaranteed you the Suns wouldn't lose by 30 plus this season with Devin Booker on the team, a guarantee that has looked very shaky to start the season, especially when the Suns' first loss of the year came to Denver with a margin of, you guessed it, 28 points. But the biggest losses have dried up for now, with the last 20 plus point one being against New Orleans 8 games ago. That loss, Max, took the win-loss record against the Pelicans to 28 wins and 28 losses. But a test for you to end, did you know, Max? With the Suns in their 51st NBA season and still trying to break the playoff drought, How many playoff appearances would you say the Suns have made in that time?
In 51 years?
Yep.
28?
29.
That's tricky.
Now, are you ready to jump straight into a number 28 theme, 7 seconds or less, with 3 more questions, Max?
Why the hell not? Let's do it.
All right, I've broken this into 3 tiers. So short term, Isaiah Cannon will be 28 years of age after this season, Max, but before that, his contract doesn't become fully guaranteed until January 10. Is Kanan a Sun on January 11th, Max?
God, I hope not. And I'll say no. I think they're going to figure this out.
All right, medium term, before the season started, Vegas set the Phoenix over-under at 28.5 wins. I think we were both pretty bullish on that amount pre-season, but right now we have 4 wins. So does Phoenix go over or under by season's end?
I was a little bullish. I had them slightly over. I thought they'd win like 29, and I'm going to have them more like 26 now.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And long term, we discussed this player just before. Devin Booker will be 28 years of age when he signs his next contract in the NBA, Max. With his extension going through his 23 to 27 years, will Booker sign his next deal with the Phoenix Suns?
Oh, why did you have to ask me that? You know what? Fuck it. Yes, he will, because we're going to be awesome, and why would he ever want to leave us, Devin? Please don't leave us.
It could be a Kemba Walker type scenario where we just got to do it and he's got to sign it, Max.
Yeah, it could be one of the things, too, where he qualifies for the Supermax. He's in an all-NBA team, and he just wants the money. And who can blame someone for wanting the money, David?
Exactly. Well, that's it for our little mashup this week, Max, and probably it for our test episode here with the Pistons game not quite holding up its end of the bargain, but hopefully another fun episode for the listeners nonetheless.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty fun conversation after that. Maybe it was a little tough during the episode, but what can you do? We don't play the games, David. We just talk about the games.
Exactly.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. You can follow me, MaxMCC11 on Twitter. You can follow David at the 4 Point Play on Twitter. You can follow our podcast at 7SOLPod on Twitter. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate our reviews. We absolutely do. David, why don't you read off a few of the people who reviewed this week?
Yeah, so I threw out the challenge for our Aussie listeners to add to the Australian version of iTunes, and Gene, DDJJ, and Boyd all answered the call, giving us 5-star ratings and really nice reviews. So thanks to those guys, and keep them coming on both sides of the ocean, Max.
Thank you, Australian fellas. We appreciate it. We need more from everywhere, but especially Australia. Come on, you got David talking about the Suns.
We're up to 9 5-stars in Australia, so hopefully we can keep that going, Max. And as I said, another fun episode, and thanks always.
Yep, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.